Imagine waking up one day in a world that feels all too familiar, one that you've inhabited your whole life. The same walls, the same routines, the same faces. Yet something is different now. There's a subtle weight pressing down on your chest, an unease you cannot shake. You cannot pinpoint at first, but the feeling lingers. It's as if the world around you is closing in, suffocating, while you remain frozen in place. You followed the path laid out before you. A steady job, a predictable life, safe choices. You avoided the risks that could disrupt the fragile equilibrium of your existence. And yet, in the silence of the morning, a gnawing question surfaces. Was this really living? Or was this just an elaborate performance, an act in which you've been the star for so long that you no longer remember who you are beneath the costume? This isn't the result of any great tragedy, nor the product of a singular catastrophic event. No, it's much subtler, almost imperceptible. It's the slow and creeping consequence of playing it safe, day after day, year after year. The danger is not an external world, but an invisible prison you've built for yourself. It's the quiet surrender of your potential, the slow erosion of your deepest desires, the retreat from the very edge of existence that could bring you closer to your true self. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped playing it safe? What if you turned your gaze inward and dared to confront the shadows lurking in the corners of your soul? What if you let go of the need for certainty and embraced the chaos of the unknown? Would it lead to freedom? Or would it simply be too much for your fragile psyche to bear? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, once warned of the dangers of living a life devoid of risk, devoid of engagement with the unknown. He spoke of the importance of integrating the unconscious, of embracing the very parts of ourselves that we fear most. Yet, how many of us truly heed this warning? How many of us are content with the safety of our comfortable lives, never daring to venture into the deep waters of our own psyche? The question hangs in the air like a storm cloud, refusing to disperse. What are the tragic consequences of playing it safe? And perhaps even more unsettling, are you already living them? As you ponder this question, consider this. There's a force within you, perhaps unknown even to yourself, pulling you towards safety. It promises comfort, stability, and security. But in doing so, it also steals from you the very essence of what it means to be alive. The answer lies not in what you know, but in what you're afraid to face. In order to truly understand the consequences of playing it safe, we must first peel back the layers of the human psyche. At the core of this issue lies a deep and unsettling paradox. The more we avoid risk and the unknown, the more we distance ourselves from our true selves. To remain secure in the familiar is, in many ways, to abandon potential for growth, for transformation, for the life we could have lived. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, wrote extensively on this tension between the known and the unknown, between the conscious and the unconscious. He suggested that the unconscious mind is not simply a passive vessel for forgotten memories or repressed desires. It is a dynamic, living force within us, one that holds a key to our true potential. The shadow, as Jung called it, represents the parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge or accept. These are the aspects of our identity that we deem unworthy, dangerous, or socially unacceptable. But Jung argued that until we integrate the shadow into our conscious awareness, we will remain incomplete, fragments of ourselves, forever trapped in a cycle of fear and denial. What does this have to do with playing it safe? Everything. To play it safe is, in many ways, a refusal to confront the shadow. It is a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the deep, uncomfortable parts of ourselves that threaten to disrupt our carefully constructed identities. The safe path is often paved with a desire for approval, for comfort, for predictability. It is a path of least resistance, where nothing unexpected occurs, and nothing is ever truly lost. But it is also the path where the most vital parts of the human experience are neglected: risk, struggle, chaos, and even failure. Think for a moment about the ways in which you've avoided the unknown in your own life. Perhaps it's in your career, where you've chosen the safe job, the one that promises security but never asks much of you. Maybe it's in your relationships, where you've kept people at arm's length, afraid of the vulnerability that comes with true intimacy. Or maybe it's in your creative pursuits, where you've stayed within the lines, never daring to create something new or original, because to do so will be to risk rejection, ridicule, or failure. Jung would argue that by avoiding these risks, by choosing safety over exploration, you are not merely avoiding discomfort. You are also rejecting a key part of your psyche. The unconscious is a vast and mysterious realm, and it will not be ignored forever. If you do not choose to engage with it voluntarily, it will eventually assert itself in ways you cannot control. It may emerge as anxiety, depression, or existential despair. It may appear as a deep sense of emptiness, a feeling that your life lacks meaning or purpose. But make no mistake, this is the shadow, quietly waiting to be acknowledged. Jung's philosophy intersects with that of Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously proclaimed that he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. For Nietzsche, the greatest danger was not the monstrous force itself, but the temptation to avoid confronting it altogether. He believed that true strength and wisdom came from confronting the chaos within us and beyond us, not by retreating from it. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or the Overman, was the embodiment of this idea, a person who has transcended the ordinary constraints of society and embraced the fullness of their existence, including the darkness and chaos that reside within. Both Jung and Nietzsche recognize that a life lived entirely in the comfort of safety and predictability is a life that is, in many ways, not fully lived. But why, then, do so many of us choose to remain within these confines? Why do we persist in playing it safe, even when we know, deep down, that it stifles our potential? The answer, in part, lies in the fear of the unknown. Human beings are, by nature, creatures of habit. We find comfort in the familiar, in what we can predict and control. This tendency is deeply rooted in our biology. The human brain is wired to seek out patterns and avoid uncertainty. For much of our evolutionary history, this instinct served us well. Our survival depended on our ability to recognize danger and retreat to safety. But in the modern world, where physical threats are less immediate, this same instinct often holds us back from embracing the very experiences that can lead to personal growth and transformation. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, would argue that this tendency to avoid the unknown stems from a deep-seated fear of freedom. To truly embrace freedom, Sartre believed, is to confront the weight of existence itself. It means accepting responsibility for our choices and recognizing that we are the architects of our own lives. But with this freedom comes profound anxiety, an awareness that we are not simply passive beings, but active participants in the creation of our reality. For many, this realization is too overwhelming, too terrifying. It's far easier to cling to the safe, familiar path, to live in the illusion that someone else is in control. This fear of freedom leads to what Sartre called bad faith, a form of self-deception in which we pretend that our lives are determined by external forces, rather than acknowledging our own agency and responsibility. When we play it safe, we are, in essence, living in bad faith. We deceive ourselves into thinking that we have no other choice, that the safe path is the only one available. But this is not true. It is simply the easier path, the one that requires the least engagement with the complexity of existence. This is where Viktor Frankl's philosophy offers an important counterpoint. Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that meaning could always be found, even in the most dire of circumstances. For Frankl, the search for meaning was the ultimate human drive, one that transcended the need for security or comfort. In his famous work Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote that those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. Playing it safe, Frankl would suggest, is a form of avoidance, avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty, avoiding the pain of confronting one's own mortality, avoiding the responsibility of creating meaning in one's life. At the heart of this issue is a profound existential question. What is the cost of safety? What do we lose when we choose the predictable, the secure, the familiar? The answer, according to Jung, Nietzsche, Sartre, and Frankl, is clear. We lose ourselves. We lose the potential to grow, to evolve, to face the unknown, and transform it into something meaningful. We lose the opportunity to become more than we are, to become the person we were always meant to be. Now, imagine what happens when this path of safety continues, unchecked and unchallenged for years or even decades. You might think the consequences are minimal, perhaps not even noticeable at first, like the slow wearing down of stone by the flow of water. But this quiet erosion seeps into every aspect of your life, slowly but inexorably shaping your reality. In the short term, playing it safe seems like the rational choice. It ensures comfort, minimizes conflict, and avoids the anxiety of risk. But as time passes, the consequences begin to reveal themselves in the form of subtle psychological shifts. The first signs are often dismissed as normal: a sense of dissatisfaction, a vague feeling of unfulfillment, an internal voice that whispers, "Is this all there is?" These feelings are easily ignored, buried beneath the noise of daily responsibilities and distractions. But as the years roll on, the emotional and psychological toll begins to deepen. The human mind, particularly the unconscious, has an uncanny ability to accumulate unaddressed needs and unresolved desires. In psychological terms, this is often referred to as repression, the process of pushing uncomfortable or threatening thoughts and emotions out of conscious awareness. When we repress our desires for something more, something deeper, the mind doesn't simply forget about them. Instead, they fester beneath the surface, like a wound left untreated, subtly influencing our behavior in ways we cannot fully control. The longer we ignore these unacknowledged aspects of our psyche, the more they manifest in unexpected ways. A once healthy sense of self begins to fragment, becoming a fractured identity, one that's no longer fully connected to the person you truly are. Cognitive dissonance arises as the mind grapples with the contradiction between who you are on the surface and the deeper, unacknowledged desires that remain hidden beneath. This tension can lead to anxiety, depression, or a sense of existential dread, a feeling that you are merely going through the motions of life, rather than actively participating in it. In this state of unconscious conflict, the mind seeks ways to find relief. Some may turn to external distractions, substances, technology, or superficial pursuits as a means of silencing the inner restlessness. Others may retreat even further into safety, doubling down on routines, on habits, on anything that promises the illusion of control. But in both cases, the underlying problem remains: the refusal to confront the unknown, to embrace the full range of human experience, including both its beauty and its chaos. The cultural conditioning we live under only exacerbates these consequences. From an early age, society teaches us to avoid risks. It encourages us to seek stability, to value predictability, and to measure success by external standards, status, wealth, security. In the modern world, we are constantly bombarded by the message that safety equals success, that the ideal life is one that is comfortable, secure, and free of surprise. This mindset, while seemingly harmless, has created an entire generation of people who are paralyzed by the prospect of failure, rejection, or uncertainty. But what society fails to recognize is that this comfort, this safety, is a double-edged sword. It may shield us from immediate discomfort, but in the long term, it isolates us from the essential experiences that contribute to a truly fulfilling life. Consider the neurobiological basis of this phenomenon. The brain's reward system is designed to respond to novelty, to challenge, and to risk. It's why we experience a sense of exhilaration or accomplishment when we step out of our comfort zone. The brain's dopamine system, which governs pleasure and reward, is activated by the unknown, by pushing past the boundaries of the familiar. But when we avoid these challenges, when we refuse to take risks, the brain's reward system becomes dormant. The resulting numbness can manifest as a sense of dissatisfaction, an emotional flatness that many people mistake for boredom or a lack of meaning. The truth, however, is that this numbness is a direct consequence of our refusal to engage with the unknown. Without novelty, without challenge, without risk, our neural pathways become stagnant, just as our psychological development does. On a societal level, the consequences are even more profound. When individuals consistently choose safety over risk, it leads to a collective stagnation. Societies that value security over exploration, stability over change, tend to become rigid and unimaginative. Innovation and progress require risk. They require people who are willing to step into the unknown, to question the status quo, and to challenge what has always been. In cultures where safety is prioritized, creativity falters, and true progress becomes nearly impossible. This is a trap. The very instinct that we believe is protecting us, our desire to avoid discomfort and risk, is actually keeping us trapped in a state of psychological and societal paralysis. We are so focused on avoiding the pain of uncertainty that we fail to recognize the deeper cost, the loss of authenticity, of purpose, of true connection to life itself. And yet, the consequences of this unseen force are not just psychological or societal. They are existential. The more we retreat into safety, the more we disconnect from the deepest parts of ourselves, the parts that crave adventure, the parts that yearn for growth. The existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. It is a feeling that arises when we realize that our lives are ours to shape, that the freedom to choose comes with a burden of responsibility." But what if we allowed ourselves to feel that anxiety? What if we leaned into the discomfort instead of retreating from it? What if we accepted the fact that life is chaotic, uncertain, and full of risks, but that it is in this very uncertainty that we find meaning? The consequences of playing it safe are profound and pervasive. They shape not just individual lives, but entire cultures, molding our very sense of what it means to live authentically. The question is no longer whether you are playing it safe, but what you stand to lose if you continue to do so. At this point, you might feel the weight of the realization settling in, the slow, insidious erosion of your potential, the ways in which your life has been constrained by the desire for safety and predictability. You might wonder if it's too late to change, if the patterns you've developed are too ingrained to break free from. But here's the thing. The very fact that you're considering this question means you're already on the verge of something extraordinary. The moment of liberation begins not with grandiose revelation, but with quiet, rebellious active awareness. The first step to breaking free from the cycle of safety is to acknowledge that you have been living in a self-imposed prison. This acknowledgement is an act of courage in itself, because it requires you to confront the truth of your own choices, the ways in which you've opted for comfort over growth. But more than that, it is a rebellion against the external forces that seek to keep you in a state of inertia. This rebellion doesn't have to be dramatic or world-shaking. It begins within. It starts with a shift in perspective, a realization that safety, while comfortable, is a mirage. The security you crave is not as solid as you believe. It is as fleeting as the next unforeseen event. Life, in its rawest form, is chaotic. It is unpredictable, wild, and often painful. But it is also alive, full of possibility, and brimming with meaning if only you are willing to engage with it fully. To break free, you must first reject the lie that you are incapable of navigating uncertainty. You must stop seeing risk as a threat and begin to see it as an opportunity for growth. When you refuse to engage with the unknown, you deny yourself the possibility of becoming something more, something deeper, more authentic, and more expansive than you could ever imagine within the confines of your comfort zone. This rebellion requires an active and conscious decision to step outside the boundaries you build around yourself. It requires courage to face the very forces that have kept you small: fear, self-doubt, societal expectations, and choose a path that is not paved with certainty, but with possibility. History is full of examples of those who chose to break free from the safety of the known. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, for instance, did not seek comfort. He believed that the greatest heights of human achievement came not from following the crowd, but from embracing struggle and suffering. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch wasn't about embracing a life of ease. Rather, it was about the willingness to forge your own path, to create meaning in a world that often seems indifferent to your existence. The Übermensch is not afraid to venture into the unknown and to become something new, even at great personal cost. Similarly, consider the lives of those who have undertaken journeys of radical personal transformation, the kind that required stepping into chaos, uncertainty, and the unknown. Steve Jobs, for instance, didn't follow the predictable path that most would have expected of him. He was willing to risk everything to create something that didn't exist yet, something that would change the world. Jobs understood at a deep level that creativity, innovation, and progress require breaking free from the safe confines of the known. The same could be said of countless artists, thinkers, and entrepreneurs who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible, despite the personal or social costs. But this rebellion isn't only about the external world. It's about rebelling against the internal forces that keep you small, the limiting beliefs, the self-doubt, and the ingrained habits that reinforce the safety of the status quo. To break free is to confront those internal forces head-on. It is to refuse to let them dictate your actions and to choose a new way of being, one that is aligned with your deeper values and desires. There is no blueprint for this kind of rebellion. It's a deeply personal journey, one that looks different for everyone. For some, it may mean quitting a secure job to pursue a passion. For others, it may involve challenging long-held beliefs or ending toxic relationships. It could be as simple as taking up a new hobby, traveling to a foreign place, or speaking up when it's easier to remain silent. The point is that every act of rebellion, no matter how small, creates a ripple effect, challenging the status quo and pushing you closer to the person you are meant to be. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants." In other words, true freedom is not simply about making choices. It's about choosing authentically, in alignment with your true desires, rather than those that have been imposed upon you by society, family, or fear. The rebellion is about reclaiming your autonomy, your agency, your power to create your own life, even in the face of uncertainty. As you begin this journey, it is essential to remember that breaking free from safety does not mean abandoning all caution or responsibility. It means living with intentionality, embracing the unknown not as a threat, but as an opportunity for growth. It means saying yes to life in all its messiness and complexity, while also acknowledging that this path may come with hardship, confusion, and even failure. But this, too, is part of the process. The discomfort, the mistakes, and the lessons learned along the way.